Bring it back.
Hey, good morning, good afternoon, everybody, wherever you are in the world, and welcome to this NAV Skills webinar. Very excited today to have Jon Long and Aydan Golaszewski with me. I'm going to have you correct that, Aydan. I talked to John at NAVOG Summit last year, and we were talking about upgrades. We both did our fair share of upgrades, and he told me that he did a 1.3 terabyte database upgrade from Classic to 3-tier, and I was like, wow, I gotta know how you pulled that one off. So I asked John if he wanted to do a webinar about it, and that's basically where we are today. So I'm very curious to hear how he pulled that one off. Before we start, some housekeeping rules. All webinars are recorded. You can find them on YouTube. If you are watching this on YouTube and you want to be invited to future webinars, subscribe to our newsletter, and you will find invites to the webinars in the newsletter. You can find the new webinars as well on the NAV Skills webinar listing on the website, which you can find. Let me show it right here, navskills.com/webinars. And here you can find the list of webinars that we have scheduled. We are always looking for content. We are always looking for people who are willing to to be a moderator for one of our webinars. So we're going to try not to interrupt the speakers with questions during the webinar. We're going to try to hold them off until the end unless it's absolutely necessary. If you have any questions, please use the GoToWebinar questions window, and we will see if it's a question we can hold until the end or if we have to interrupt the speakers. Of course, a big thanks to Liberty Growth Software for sponsoring the webinars and having them use our GoToWebinar account. So with that, I'm going to give the floor to John and to Aydan. So let me make John presenter, and John, you have the floor.
Great. Well, welcome, and thanks for having me. My name is Jon Long. I've been working for Archerpoint for 9 or 10 years. Prior to that, I also did upgrades. I've been largely doing upgrades for 10 years, and most people think I'm crazy for that, but I really love it, and believe it or not, I can exercise creativity within that arena. And I have, and I do, and I really enjoy it. I've probably done 300 upgrades in the last 20 years, and they just get more exciting for me. And Aydan, I'll let you briefly introduce yourself, and then I'll get into the fun stuff.
Good morning, everyone. Thanks for attending. Like they say, my name is Aydan, however you want to pronounce it. And I've been at Jason Pharmaceuticals for the last 9 years. I've been working with NAV since 2001. I've done 3 large upgrades, and mostly as a user, but I'm not exactly a user because I have a technical training, and I like managing these projects. I like data, and I like working with NAV, and I worked on this project primarily managing the project and getting us to good results with John, and I guess that's about it. Thank you.
Okay, so the agenda is, believe it or not, I'm going to describe what an upgrade is. I'm also going to describe the upgrade that was the most complex upgrade that I'd ever done. We went live in May last year. It was a miracle. But we're actually doing a 1.7 upgrade, 1.7 terabyte upgrade as we speak. And but we will focus on the challenge that we had with Medifast. Our objectives of the session is hopefully when you're done, you'll You'll be able to identify what an upgrade challenge is, how to navigate extreme circumstances. There's three in particular that I'm hoping that you can all stick around for, some tricks that you'll be able to have some fun with if you're encountering the challenge that we did, and perhaps know the complexity of your upgrade, or perhaps the non-complexity of it when you see how complex they can actually be. So here's how we did it. We had a plan A, which is to essentially start over, bring all the customizations forward, just create any imbalances, and take that 1.3 gigabyte database and create a 2 gigabyte database and wait 5 years and do it all over again. Plan B, selectively compress our ledgers and just bring some detail forward. That is much more challenging than it sounds. And plan C is carry over all ledgers, essentially upgrade everything, and just purge the low-hanging fruit. We actually started all those three projects, and plan C won. This is just a brief description of an upgrade of a massive facility in Massachusetts that started out in the 1700s as a building that supported the war efforts and went through major permutations throughout the years, and recently has become an art gallery. So I'm going to refer to this because I thought it was a really cool analogy for what companies go through when they upgrade. Here's a little bit of some past upgrade. Perhaps some stairs, some old doorways that used to be tall and are fabricated to the art gallery. Here's a data port where they bring their art into the building. Some old bricks and some of the new bricks. They've obviously gone through many upgrades. So real quick, the upgrade topography. Here's the platform, which includes all the DLLs and the EXEs and all the good stuff that supports the interface of NAV. It's basically the operating system. We call that the technical when you do a platform upgrade. And then we have the code, so all the objects, of course, and we call that the application upgrade, and that's the that's where the ERP lives and thrives. And then we have tables, which is a different animal in itself. That's where the data lives, and the different types of upgrades. You can upgrade your platform independent of your ERP application. You can upgrade your code, and you can upgrade everything all at once, which would be a major version upgrade, which Microsoft delivers annually, mostly. So those are your types of upgrades. Application object only, that's pretty rare, but you could upgrade an ISV perhaps without upgrading the platform. So the key factors in an upgrade really are the size of your DB, and if you're going to classic to RTC, there's obvious major bumps, of course, with converting forms to pages and all the other stuff, the dimension rewrite that Microsoft did, which I honestly think is one of the most technical advancements that they've done in the past 10 years. Major paradigm shift in the way they process dimensions and dimension set entries, increases speed and decreases the footprint of the database. Number of customized base objects obviously is a biggie also. We're not going to go into that during this session because it's not really a challenge. It's just work. Number of add-ons can be a major challenge in external interfaces. So Medifast is a complex upgrade. And this is their kind of topography of their system. Clients rarely give me these types of things. It was really helpful in our upgrade, so we could just stare at this and figure out, what questions we need to ask, what interfaces, what this does, and it's just a great conversation piece. So I'll let Aydan talk about the next few slides here.
Yeah, thank you, John. As we go from company to company, I have found it very useful when I get in there to draw a diagram like this. The big circle represents NAV and what modules are we using in NAV, and the little circles outside the big circle are, we see here, for example, a payment system, a commissioning system. It could be a tax system. So this is a picture from 2000, beginning of 2010. We did an upgrade, and this was done right before that upgrade. As you can imagine, if we're upgrading with a picture like this, it helps us to decide on the complexity a little bit, because each of these lines are interfaces, and maybe there is something special we're doing that's not coming with the base system. So we have to pay attention to that, and we found that very useful. Now, we're going to show you the next one that was drawn. Look at what happened to our system and this is not my fault, by the way. It's just the result of development. This was our situation before the upgrade. And the reason we have two big circles here is because we needed to take shipping and warehousing away from what we're doing in NAV, because this is a special company in the sense that an average NAV company could have 30 orders a day, 300 orders a day, but we can have 6,000 small orders a day. This is the specialty of this one. You know, there are companies with 30 levels of bill of materials, but this is the complexity at Medifast Jason Pharmaceuticals. And as you can see, we got connected to banks. We set up a business intelligence system. So all those peripheral systems have their own needs. And basically, at that time, we were looking at a very complex thing. And if you ask me today, I do have a newer version. I have added, this is also not the latest version, the complex one. After the upgrade, we could comfortably change things again in these circles around the big circles. And pretty soon we're getting a third large circle because we're adding an external warehouse management system. So what does that do? That makes it even more complex, because now we're going to have a set of EDI interfaces. So all of these interfaces have to be considered, carried over, special code has to be carried over, and most important, they all have to be carefully tested. So on the day you go live, whether you have 3 interfaces or 30 interfaces, and they all have to work. If they don't work, then it's not really a successful upgrade.
So where to begin with your massive, complex system? You start digging a hole. You start digging into the code, you start digging into the data, you start digging into the ISVs, you do your analysis and design, and here's this guy working on that building that became an art building. And then really the challenges that you're facing with the Classic to RTC are the go live runtime has to be 48 hours, really, in any upgrade, and that's the biggest challenge with coming from Classic to RTC, because of those stumbling blocks of the upgrade toolkit in 2013 requires just the changes behind the scenes. Simply opening the database can take 2 to 60 days. We've seen it happen. And I'll show you in the next couple slides how we overcame that. Running step 2, the famous step 2. If you don't know what it is, it's just briefly, it's where the dimensions are converted. It's essentially where the old data is converted into the new schema. And we've seen that take 2 to 60 days. And if it takes 2 days, that's a problem. But 60 days is an overwhelming problem. So here's the next 3 slides, I believe, are the solutions. I only have one screen open, so I don't have my notes. But opening in 2013 takes a long time. Honestly, the best solution is hardware. So this isn't really a trick or a hack. It's just buy more RAM, spend the $30,000+ to get SQL Enterprise. It's a lot cheaper than a $600,000 reimplementation. CPU speed, even fractions can increase the speed of churning through all that data. You might not need it for production, but it definitely comes in handy for an upgrade. And then, of course, hard drives. And VM allocation is a tricky one because you don't always have access to the servers the way the network admins do, and sometimes the network admins can give you false impressions of how they allocated the VM. We've been surprised a lot digging into that beast. So here's a trick to decrease the time of the dimension conversion. Add an index to the SQL table for the dimension, ledger entry dimension and posted document dimension tables for each dimension code that exists in their system. Now, this trick is really only beneficial if they have complex dimension tree. In the case of Medifast, they only had 4 dimensions that they used, so it really didn't decrease the time that much. But we've seen companies that have 56 different dimensions that they use, and that's where this trick can reduce a 60-day, actually the worst I've ever seen was 58 days, reduced down to 2 hours. And to get past the 16 field index limitation that SQL Server has, me and some members of our team have a Seaside script that creates, it's a dynamic stored procedure essentially that creates indexes on the table with the included columns property. And I'm not going to go into it here because it would take a whole hour, but there'll be a blog coming. Saurav Diani is going to write it, and he's on the call right now, so perhaps in the last 10 minutes, if you have any specific questions on that, you can ask him. But it's surprisingly comprehensive and complex sounding, but super simple to implement. And we'd be happy to share it with you. So let's say in the case of Medifast, we apply our dynamic indexing, which we call it, and running step 2 still takes 2 to 6 days. Well, trick number 2 is dimension caching. This is actually really simple. We just run the step and hope that it finishes. And if it's running for more than 3 days, you get a little fidgety. And after 60 days, the client really is getting fidgety. And they don't believe that it'll ever finish, but it will finish as long as you have a stable server. So what you do then is you cache your dimension set entries, and you identify the ledgers that were affected, and you only process the delta. In other words, the ledgers and the dimensions that were created after you did the last conversion. So that's a really cool trick too. We're going to write a blog on that. These are the bullet points here. You could probably figure it out with these bullet points, but look for a blog to come. Now, the bonus of the dimension caching is the posted document dimensions. We've seen them in the billion. Number of records equals 1.3 billion or more. And so when you cache it, it reduces the size of the database before you open it up in 2013. So that's another bonus of this particular trick. So now how do you delete 1.3 billion ledger entries? Well, if you're a seasoned Seaside developer, you're going to set a filter on date range, and delete all. Total elapsed time, roughly 8 hours in our testing. But that's the wrong way to do it. We're gonna export and renumber table A in this case, which would be a base table, the post document dimension table for this exercise. But you can do this for any table. This is a generic data purge trick that's awesome, and we use it all the time. Rename it to table B in the 50,000 range. Re-import table A. This results in an empty table A, and it only takes 30 seconds. Then you run a SQL script to move only the necessary data, say last year's or the last 6 months posted ledgers into from table B into table A. Then you truncate and delete table B, which takes about a second. Total runtime, 1 minute. So that takes an 8-hour runtime down to 1 minute. Pretty cool trick. Not probably blog worthy, but you can get the idea just from the bullet points there. I think we're ahead of schedule, so if anybody has any questions, I'm not looking at the chat window.
There's been no questions so far.
So external interfaces, you obviously saw a pretty complex diagram of Medifast system. So having somebody on staff that knows the system is really crucial. I don't think we could have got through this upgrade successfully without Aydan's insight and a diagram that she was intimately familiar with. I think infrastructure expertise is helpful too, because you working with network administrators that have been working on a client site for 5-10 years, they get pretty confident, I guess, about their expertise, and it really does help to have somebody on your staff that can ask the right questions without offending them. You know, I like to ask lots of stupid questions because it really does uncover perhaps weaknesses that are sitting right under their nose that they've become complacent about, especially when you have an upgrade. The upgrade infrastructure is vastly, has vastly different requirements than a production environment. And sometimes it's temporary infrastructure that they need. So that's important. And then also the dynamics of the team. You're really working, you have two different teams. You have a customer team, and they have their project manager, and sometimes it's the IT director, sometimes it's somebody else, sometimes it's 3 different people on a team of 15. And then you have your own team, if you're a VAR, with your own project manager and a team, and somehow you need to work together. And I think with Medifast, the Medifast experience, it was one of the most intense kind of multi-team experiences I've ever had. Aydan was a great all-around project manager, technical manager, and kept everybody going. It was like a circus act. Believe it or not, the entire runtime of the project was 5 months from beginning to end. There's probably 5 months of pre-sales and analysis just to figure out how much it would cost and what all the moving pieces were before we even touched the database. But from beginning to end, when we started merging to the time we went live was 5 months, and then a couple weeks of post-go live support. And I'll let Aydan talk a little bit more about the team part of that with no slides to support that. Aydan, do you have anything you want to add?
I would like to add that it's, the importance of this. If you have a small company, people are busy and you don't have a lot of internal staff, so it becomes a serious issue, because if you expect your VAR to figure out everything, this is not very easy. The reason is there could be things you're doing, things you need, and if you don't explain these things to them, they will not be able to do the right things. Let me give you a funny example that went wrong, and we had to get scrambled to get it fixed. We had two item cards. I had a separate item card that's editable. So only two people, three people in the company, the two super users, me and my colleague, one more person gets into the item card to edit it. So of course, how should they know that they updated the regular item card and they had no idea that there's a second item card that's editable. So when we started testing that area, we couldn't edit any item cards. So, so these kinds of things. But in terms of testing together, so are we going to talk about that now, John, about testing tools or communication tools for testing?
Sure.
What is extremely important is so they will log into some kind of environment and try to do the logged defects, to work on them, right? It's extremely important. It does not matter what product it is. You can log your issues with their current status and who's working on it, etc., on an Excel sheet, or we had a better system, but we really took ownership of their issue management system. I took ownership of that. I made sure that every morning, early in the morning, I sat there and I looked at the status of everything and asked each person, if it's in my team, I said, did you test this? Where are you with this? Did we send this to the user? Because there's multiple levels. There's like key people who look at these changes, review them briefly, and you will have to select some key users who do this work every time. You know, I know every part of my system. I know no part of my system as well as the person who does that task each and every day, again and again and again. They look for 5 minutes and they will know if it's working or not. So it's extremely important to select some users and tell them, you are part of this project. We know it's going to be difficult to fit it in your daily work, but for the success of a project, especially if you have limited time, we had other projects coming that are going to be built on top of this, other systems. So we did not really have any playroom. So my users were excellent. And each day we communicated to each other. I've worked on this. I've fixed this. You test this. I've tested this. This is what I found. You fixed it. So this communication has to go on very intensely. And then the team feels like they're working together. If they feel like they're working together, on the day of the upgrade, there won't be any finger pointing saying, we told you to do it this way and you didn't do it. It's like, if you expect that from your VAR, it's very likely it's not going to be a very pleasant experience, even if you have the best VAR in the world, for these reasons. That's all I have to say. I wanted to say a couple more things. John, what should I say about some other neat things that we did on this project that saved time and energy? You can give me the word, really.
Well, at Go Live, we had, I wouldn't say we have people on site at every Go Live from our VAR, but we had 4 people on site. We had, I was actually on site, which is a rarity. As a lead link, I tend to be a better delegator when I'm working from my home office. But I was there, and we had a extremely smart developer on site, as well as a senior developer that wasn't even a part of the upgrade, that was there for support, and a functional consultant in Rick Dearden that has been working with Medifast for 10 years. And then we had our developers in India running the actual go live. So we essentially pulled, we did every single thing possible to make sure that there was no failure. And a funny story, it ended up being a 40-hour runtime. We actually expected 38 hours, but we had some problems during the middle of the night where there was one process that failed, and it gave us a 2-hour delay. And usually during an upgrade like this one, we'll do 6 checkpoint backups in case opening it up in 2013 fails for some reason. We can roll it back and not have to go all the way back to the beginning if something becomes corrupt. And at one point, we were getting to the point where we were going to delay it to the point where it would be detrimental. We'd have to roll back, and the go live wouldn't happen on May 22nd. It would have to wait till September. So we elected to not take any more backups. So the last 15 hours, we were literally climbing El Capitan without ropes. It was pretty intense, but we made it through. And I remember also early on in the project, we had a particularly intense meeting when we were talking about all plans, plan A, plan B, and plan C. And in the back of my mind, all I wanted to do was talk about plan C, which is upgrading everything. The other plans didn't interest me, but nobody could decide which detail they wanted to bring forward, or whether they wanted to leave everything behind, what that meant. And after that phone call that had 20 people on it, I called up Aydan and I said, Aydan, I really think we should focus on just upgrading. I know we can do it. And if we do it, it'll be a miracle, but I'm shooting for a miracle. And then I remember when we actually went live, Aydan said to me on Sunday night, after everything was done and everything's tested, she said, we pulled off a miracle. So it's difficult, but it's not impossible. What else did you want to say about the team?
Okay, so we could move a little bit. So we, to ensure that your team is working well together, you have to define what you want to do. So one of the things we defined with my team and Archerpoint team was what data to keep and what data to purge, and that was decided relatively early. And then they feel comfortable, the VAR, because it's all decided what they need to do. So I thought that was very useful, and then you can make lists. Like I said, I talked about the issue lists and how many issues. Like you can go live with 5 or 6 issues on your list. We went live with 3 issues on our list, and we said we will figure this out. It wasn't easy, but it's you can pick your battles. If it's very important to go live on that day, your issue list does not have to be completely clean. It depends on the issue. We had about 110 issues altogether, I think. Or was it 190? 190, which is a healthy number, because the more issues you find, that means the more you have tested, and small things you've caught everything. And honestly, the things we haven't caught were not more than some of the things you haven't caught during testing could come out 6 months later. So maybe we had 2 or 3 things we said, oh, we didn't see this when we were testing. And that's also normal. It just cannot be something that disturbs the whole flow of things. So we talked about defect management. The other thing is we really analyzed our reports, and it helped a lot, because we found maybe 2 reports that we should have considered and we didn't. But they put a report tracer in our system, which I found marvelous, because that recorded which reports are really being used. It reduces the cost of the upgrade, and it reduces the work that needs to be spent specifically between Classic and RTC, because that's not a task that's needed later. But I thought that was very useful. And the other thing was, of course, when you're testing, you run into these 2 environments between Classic and RTC have slightly different. The permission needs will change. They're not going to be exactly mappable one-to-one. So what we did is we recorded the permissions in the test environment, kept correcting them, improving them as people were testing, and Archerpoint just copied the permission tables into production we took those into production with us. This saves you during go live. You know, you have a lot of steps to do, but the one thing you don't need to worry about is, am I going to have permission problems pop up here and there when I go live? Because it's all tested with the set of permissions that you go live with. So I hope you take that down as also a good tip. What else do we have? Yes, I talked about testing extensively now. Anything else? If you don't test something, this is what you end up with.
This is an
Weirdest
example,
thing.
not testing throughput. Can two cars go through the same tunnel at the same time? Of course, post go live is also another factor in a complex upgrade, and these slides were originally designed for a slightly different bent on this particular type of topic, upgrading a complex upgrade. I realize the name of the session is specific to upgrading a 1.3 terabyte database, but Go Live Monday is specific to really any upgrade, whether it's small or large, but especially when it's large. All the testing is really practicing for this day.
Know, this picture, John, shows the technical, the small ERP team were the key people. But our users were not really like this. Because if you involve your users the right way, they will trust you and Archerpoint, and you know they won't go into panic mode necessarily if they've been part of it enough, and if it's nothing new to them, and that shows the importance of allowing them to be part of it and also giving them a full-blown test system where they can see everything, especially between 2009 and later versions, because the interface changes. So our users were much calmer than us when we went live. I have to admit.
Well, some of them were. I would have to say that most people thought it was impossible to upgrade a 1.3 terabyte database. That's why we had Plan A and B. But I really felt that we could pull off a miracle. So, and Aydan believed in me. And but I do remember one time during the go live Sunday, getting ready for the next day, and you came in and said, if you don't get this report working, we're not going live. So there was a little bit of we're all on our toes.
That is right. The project team suffers the most, yes.
So here's the forgotten part of the upgrade. Everybody who works on the system, they're not a part of the upgrade at all. They're dreading it. And then the very next day, this is that building I was talking about. This is what they used to do in there, and this is what the upgraded building looks like now. This beautiful art museum.
And I can say that it almost feels like and I'm not drawing a very rosy picture there, believe me, that our system kind of got into this calm mode, mostly due to, of course, we shed a lot of data, but this new server that we have and the flow of data has gotten much smoother. I am interrupted in my outside work hours much less now because of things getting stuck or processes stopping and systems not answering each other in time. All these things, it's really like cleaning up and remodeling. And after that, of course, it's up to you if you clutter it again. But I now have this calmer feeling with our system looking back it's almost a year now. It's going towards a year, and it has stayed like that, which is a wonderful feeling, I have to say.
That's great. This was on the wall of the art gallery, even though they've upgraded. Everybody, as a developer, has seen messages similar to this, so I just thought I'd take a picture of it because it reminded me of an NAV error. Well, we ended early, so I thought I would go overtime, but I guess I talked fast. Did I miss anything, Aydan?
No, I think you covered what we wanted to cover. It could have to do with the fact that at NAV we interrupted the talk to discuss, answer various questions and
Yes,
make
we did have a
online.
conversation.
Yeah,
Style.
that's right.
There was one question that came in about the data purge where you were re-importing into table A, and how does that delete data? Do you want to go back over that? Or
Sure.
can you give any demo on, or not demo, but any more explanation on speeding up the dimensions? But
Sure, I can start with the data purge. Like I said, this would be the traditional Seaside expert way to do it within NAV. And I know from experience from writing unit tests that tests writing and reading and deleting records and time in it, that it takes about 8 hours to delete 1.3 billion records. So that's just not an option. The trick when you export, let's say the posted document dimension table, obviously it exports it as it exists, its customizations and all, and then when you renumber it to a 50,000 range object, it simply renames that object in the actual system object table. So it just takes a second or less. So that part's done. At that point, you don't have a posted document dimension table, of course. You've broken your database. So you re-import table A. This results in the posted document table, in this case table A, being imported back into the database without any data in it. It's empty. So that's a trick that essentially moves data from one table to another without actually having to do a move command in any capacity, SQL Server or otherwise. So then at that point, you have all your data in a table that's in a 50,000 range object, and you can just move the data. Say that the posted document dimension table has data from all the way back to 2005. And you're doing the conversion in January of 2017. Well, if you do this in combination with my dimension caching trick, which I can show you, or any other required data purge that you're doing, you can just move the data that you need into that empty table. So you're just working with the delta. You're just working with the data that you want. And then you truncate, use the truncate command in SQL Server, which is a vastly faster command than the delete command in SQL Server. Those are the two ways to delete data in a SQL Server table within SQL Server: truncate and delete. Delete has the overhead of writing to the log. Truncate doesn't. It's as simple as that. So that's where you get the 1 minute runtime.
okay, another question, they would like to see some examples of indexes that are recommended creating. And then along with that question, somebody else asked, did you try to deactivate all secondary keys on an upgrade? And if yes, what were your experiences doing that? And then I have 2 more questions after that.
Okay, we have plenty of time, so
yeah,
I'll ask the first one first. So the first thing you could try, if they have 16 or less dimension codes, you could manually create a key that literally is dim1, dim2, dim3, dim4, dim5, dim6, etc., all the way through dim16 on the ledger entry dimension, the posted document dimension table, and that will suffice. When you get past 16, SQL Server has a limitation on the number of fields in an index. It limits it at 16. So that's when you have to get into a trick that there's going to have to be a blog written about this. And if Sarov is in the audience, you could we unmute Sarov to give him a chance to give us a little more detail on that solution? Or do we want to get that deep into it?
I don't know. I have to find him. Okay, he's unmuted.
Okay.
Yep.
We have had a few customers that have had just crazy number of dimensions. So I'll let Sarov explain how to get around that challenge.
Yeah, so the case where we found it is when a customer is using more than 8 dimension, which is normally that we find in a Cronus database. So during the dimension upgrade process, there are some temporary tables are created in SQL to keep that data before the dimension set ID is assigned to the records. While doing this, the NAV code, if you refer the upgrade code unit 104049, creates some tables as well as create some indexes on those temporary tables, which are used to for the dimension conversion engine. In the standard Microsoft toolkit, Microsoft consider an index which have the first 4 dimensions, as John explained, as dim 1, 2, 3, and 4, as an index in that particular temp table. But it gives you a very great performance when you have less dimension is being used in your customer database, as well as if you have a small dimension tree. But if you have a situation like where customer is having 32 dimension or 56 dimensions, and I'm talking about dimension, not dimension values, then that index slows down the process to get the unique combination. So what we actually have done in that particular code unit is we have added one more index based on number of records in the dimension table. So let's say if there are 56 dimension in the customer database, we have created a generic index based on the count of dimensions. So if it is 56 column, the index is from dim 1 till dim 56. But at the same time, there is a limitation at SQL end where it let you have only 16 fields in an index. And if you want to add further fields, then there is something called as included fields. So that command actually creates that index, which speed up that process to get the unique combination pretty quickly on a large database.
And Sarav's going to write a blog on this, right, Sarav?
Sure, I'll have it.
And if you want to learn more about it in the meantime, Microsoft has an MSDN article. If you just Google included columns, you'll get a pretty good description on how to create those.
Yeah, I think it's important to stress. It's important to understand how dimensions are changing between the jump from 2009 to later versions. If you understand that dimension combinations are kept now in a table, and you have to empty your other tables, it will help a lot. And this is what we did. We collected all the combinations, possible combinations, looking at our existing data into one table. And then when you run your system, it will go and find the combination there according to the new data model.
Yeah, the paradigm shift that Microsoft created was instead of creating a record for each dimension that was posted, in one ledger entry could result in some cases 56 records in the posted document dimension table. And now the new paradigm is that there's a record in the dimension set entry table that includes every conceivable combination of dimensions. So in the case of some of the most complex upgrades I've seen, 1.3 billion records of posted document dimensions pre-2013 results in 10,000 potential combinations, a huge reduction in footprint on the hard drive. Massive improvement in performance as well.
Okay, and then the follow-on with talking about keys, did you try to deactivate all secondary keys on then upgrade? And if yes, what were your experiences doing that?
We have tried that, and you know, I would call that maybe a minor improvement. We don't, you know, it's one of those things that might reduce it by hours, but it doesn't reduce it by days. So, Saurabh, do you have any anecdotal experiences that can give something maybe more clinical metric on that?
No, John, we are still, working on it on a huge database to see the impact. As in, even if we do about the secondary keys, whenever we, try to disable and enable a key, we also need to remember that there is a overhead that will come into picture maybe at the later stage of the project.
Yeah, that's happened to me too, is when I was doing upgrades and I disabled the secondary keys, you had to go back through, re-enable them, and then that's still taking all the same amount of time. But it did save, like you said, just maybe an hour when doing the 2013 Unicode conversion myself. Another question is, this one's, why did you decide to remove the WMS from the main NAV database?
Very simple. If the environment is using the warehouse module, say you have a traditional NAV system and you're using the warehouse module and you're shipping in that NAV system and you're shipping lots of small boxes. The activity of shipping is going to have an impact on everything else, negative impact. And to avoid that, if you have reached limits where you're shipping 6,000, 7,000 little boxes a day, it is a preferable solution to take out your warehousing and shipping activity outside of NAV. And NAV doesn't lose any of its role because you have to report every shipping and every movement and everything, so which adds an interface, but it's not that difficult. It's working quite well in our case. And there are multiple companies that offer multiple levels of solutions, which I like all of them. We have a very complex system, but they're very simple systems in the market. It has eased our pain points tremendously over time. The other downside of if you are doing lot tracking and shipping to customers, especially in the food industry, lot tracked items, you have to enter the specific lot when you're shipping, which becomes a huge problem if you're shipping individual small boxes and thousands of them. So we couldn't even do that with the regular NAV. So you need a little bit of an add-on, and there are things that mesh very well in this sense. So basically, you handle the lot tracking in a secondary system so that it doesn't bog down your data flow. And I think this strictly has to do with the volume of work you're processing through your system. I hope that answers your question.
Hope so too. They'll ask again if it doesn't. There's a couple. Okay, that did answer their question. Great. There's a question. People would like to get more detail on the dimension caching. Another one about how do you handle the huge GL ledger entry and item ledger entry. But I think that was I think that goes back to the how did the table A and B with moving that. That's how you did it, right?
Not necessarily. Not necessarily. We have to keep our GL entry and item ledger entry John can talk to that.
Yeah, I can tell you that the item ledger entry, I have posted a blog on that. It's on Archerpoint's website under some digest. We do internal postings on things, especially Microsoft responses to some of our tickets, and they had a interesting detailed list on how you would go about essentially purging or compressing your item ledger entries. I would never do that. Of course, it would reduce the size of your database, but you're also introducing a lot of risk. And we've never had to go there to reduce our runtime. Once we get our runtime down to around 40 hours, we just stop right there. And
Okay.
so I think the ILE would give you perhaps, you know, if you could figure out how to do it, you could probably sell it. But we just haven't gone there, and Microsoft's given us a solution, and it still sounds a little bit too complex. And as far as the GL entry, you can use, there's all sorts of compression tools that you can compress your GL entries. But in this case, we decided to leave them all intact.
Okay.
Basically, the problem you're going to get is mostly with reporting, because if it's a fine-tuned system like ours, on a day-to-day basis, working with GL entries or item ledger entries is absolutely not a problem. It becomes a problem if we want to run a general report on everything. It could become a problem if we don't have very strong servers, and reports could take a little longer. And our solution to that is either use secondary reporting systems or write SQL reports. If we can't get anywhere with, if it's huge, the data need, and they want everything, and we can't deliver it through any NAV native report or customized report, we go to other methods in terms of reporting. That's the only place where I end up saying, well, we can't improve this anymore because of the size of our item ledger entries and GL entries.
Okay. How long did it take to go from 13 to 17? And did you go directly, or did you do steps in between?
We do have a consolidated upgrade toolkit where we've engineered Microsoft's multiple steps, so to speak, upgrade toolkits into one in some cases. I think we stop at 2015 perhaps, or perhaps at 2013 or two, but it's essentially from 2009 all the way to 2017.
Okay.
So it depends on where they come from. If they're coming from 3.6, you know, we don't go back that far. But we
Okay,
try
then.
to.
Oh, I'm trying to get stuff in the last 2 minutes here.
Okay.
Are the scripts? They're asking if you had scripts to test the upgraded data, especially dimensions, and was there an easy way to get dimension set IDs for records into the custom table? I think that's the dimension caching.
Yes.
In regards to testing, how was testing process handled? Did the users make detailed test specs, or did you guys do that, or what was done? And then another question was, were the reports a problem? But it sounded like you guys handled reports through going with SQL Server reporting and other methods to get your reports.
Only
So
for our paper, no, they weren't a problem in general because they just converted our reports. We just found out which reports we're using, and we use mostly NAV reports for our needs.
okay, but it looks like we're going to run out of time. Are you going to blog about the dimension caching?
Yeah, I will. And you can watch this video, and if you just look at the slide, you should be able to figure it out. But the challenge, you're right, is how do you update the ledger entries with that dimension set entry, and what are the risks if the client takes 8 months, for instance, to test their database, and they've added dimension set or dimensions since then. That will be a blog post. I won't be able to answer that right now. As far as reports go, we've gone through permutations, and I'm going to run back to my bottom slide so I can end.
We're at time actually now, so
Okay.
here we go. Did you want to go back to your one and then we'll end on that? And I hope I got everybody's questions at least asked or answered. Thanks everybody for coming. Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.